Some lists change everything. When 16-year-old Madison Clark pulled out a folded piece of notebook paper and began reading the 10 things she wanted to do before she died, nobody in Studio 6B was prepared for what came next. Jimmy Fallon had interviewed thousands of guests, handled every possible situation with grace and humor, but he'd never encountered anything like this. The laughter that had filled the studio just moments before died completely. The cameras kept rolling, but this wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a teenage girl facing mortality with more courage than most adults could muster, and her final bucket list item would silence Jimmy Fallon in a way that nothing ever had before. It started 3 months earlier when Madison Clark, a junior at Roosevelt High School in Columbus, Ohio, posted a TikTok video that would change her life forever. She was sitting in her hospital bed during a chemotherapy session, wearing a bright yellow head wrap and the biggest smile anyone could imagine, lip-syncing to one of Jimmy Fallon's Tonight Show monologue jokes about teenage driving. The caption read, "Chemo Day 12, still trying to make Jimmy Fallon laugh from my hospital bed. Make Jimmy Laugh Challenge, Chemo Warrior, still smiling." The video went viral overnight, not because it was particularly funny or clever, but because there was something indefinable about Madison's energy, her refusal to let terminal illness dim her light, that captured hearts across social media. Soon, thousands of people were posting their own Make Jimmy Laugh Challenge videos, but Madison remained the originator, the brave girl who had turned her darkest moment into an opportunity to spread joy. Madison had been diagnosed with glioblastoma, an aggressive brain tumor, 6 months before that first TikTok video. The doctors had been brutally honest with her and her parents. This wasn't the kind of cancer you beat. This was the kind you fought as long and as hard as you could, making every day count. The median survival rate was 15 months from diagnosis. At 16, most kids are worried about prom dates and college applications. Madison was planning a bucket list and trying to figure out how to make her remaining time matter. Her parents, David and Jennifer Clark, had watched their vibrant, funny, impossibly optimistic daughter handle her diagnosis with more grace than they could muster. David, a high school English teacher, had seen thousands of teenagers in his career, but none had ever displayed the emotional maturity Madison showed in the face of her diagnosis. Jennifer, a pediatric nurse, ironically enough, had worked with sick children for 15 years, but watching her own daughter navigate terminal illness taught her things about courage she'd never understood before. Madison had always been the one to cheer up her friends, to find the silver lining in any situation, to make people laugh when they needed it most. Even facing her own mortality, she couldn't stop being exactly who she'd always been, a light in the darkness for everyone around her. Her younger brother Tyler, just 13, later said that Madison never once complained about her situation. Instead, she worried about how her illness was affecting everyone else. She would ask me how I was doing in school, if I was okay, if I needed to talk, Tyler remembered. Here she was, literally dying, and she was taking care of me. That's just who Madison was. Her oncologist, Dr. Sarah Martinez, at Nationwide Children's Hospital, had never encountered a patient quite like Madison. Most teenagers facing terminal diagnosis go through predictable stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression. Madison seemed to skip right to acceptance, but not the resigned kind, the empowered kind. She approached her treatment like a project she was determined to complete successfully, even knowing the ultimate outcome. When Jimmy's producers reached out to Madison's family about appearing on The Tonight Show, Madison's first reaction was pure joy. Not because she was starstruck or excited about being on television, but because she saw it as the ultimate opportunity to complete one of the items on her bucket list: make 1 million people smile. The bucket list itself had become legendary in her small community. Madison had started writing it the day after her diagnosis, sitting in her bedroom surrounded by get-well cards from classmates who didn't know what to say to someone their age facing death. She'd approached it With the same methodical thinking she applied to everything else, researching each item, considering the logistics, making sure every dream was achievable within her constraints. She spent weeks on that list, her mother Jennifer recalled. She would write something, cross it out, rewrite it. She researched costs, locations, feasibility. She treated it like the most important assignment of her life, which I guess it was. The list went through 7 different versions before Madison settled on the final 10 items. Some were simple teenage dreams, seeing the ocean, eating at a fancy restaurant. Others revealed the depth of someone forced to grow up too quickly, recording a song for her funeral, writing letters to family members for future milestones she wouldn't be there to see. Item number 6 was originally go skydiving, David Clark remembered with a laugh, but after researching it, she realized the insurance complications and physical requirements made it impossible with her treatment schedule, so she changed it to feel like I'm flying. We ended up taking her on a helicopter ride over Lake Erie. She said it was better than skydiving because she could actually enjoy the view. The taping was scheduled for a Tuesday night in November. Madison had traveled from Ohio with her parents, and despite being in the middle of an intensive treatment schedule, she was more energetic than she'd been in weeks. The steroids used to control her brain swelling gave her bursts of almost manic energy between the crushing fatigue of chemotherapy. This happened to be one of her good days. She wore a beautiful purple dress that her mother had bought specially for the occasion and a purple head wrap that matched perfectly. Purple had always been Madison's favorite color, the color of royalty, she'd always said, and I'm the queen of my own story. The head wrap had become her signature look, featured in dozens of TikTok videos. She owned over 30 different ones, each more creative than the last. People think the head wrap is just about covering up being bald, Madison had explained in one of her videos, but I think of it as my crown. Every day I put it on, I'm choosing to be royal, I'm choosing to reign over my own kingdom, even if my kingdom is just a hospital room. Jimmy had planned the segment carefully. He wanted to celebrate Madison's viral success, talk about her incredible positivity, maybe do a few of his signature games with her. It was supposed to be uplifting, inspiring, the kind of feel-good content that reminded people of the resilience of the human spirit. What he hadn't planned for was how much Madison's presence would affect him personally. The moment Madison walked onto the Tonight Show stage, the audience erupted in applause. But this wasn't typical studio audience enthusiasm. This was 300 people showing genuine love and support for a teenage girl whose story had touched millions. Madison waved and smiled, completely at ease despite the magnitude of the moment, as if she'd been doing television appearances her entire life. I practiced my entrance for weeks, she later told her parents. I wanted to make sure I looked confident and happy, not like a sick kid people should feel sorry for. Madison Clark, everybody, Jimmy announced, giving her a warm hug as she sat down in the guest chair. You are the reason millions of people have been smiling for the past 3 months. Madison beamed. Well, Jimmy, I figured if I'm going to be stuck in a hospital bed, I might as well try to make it fun. Plus, hospital food is terrible, so I needed something to distract me from thinking about lunch. The audience laughed, and Jimmy immediately understood why Madison had connected with so many people. She had a gift for finding humor in the darkest situations without minimizing their seriousness. The interview started exactly as planned. Jimmy asked about the original TikTok video, about how it felt to have her challenge go viral, about the thousands of response videos people had posted. Madison answered every question with humor and insight that seemed impossible for someone her age, especially someone dealing with what she was dealing with. So tell me about this challenge, Jimmy said. What made you decide to try to make me laugh from your hospital bed? Madison's eyes lit up. Well, I was watching your show during chemo, which, by the way, is the best medicine ever because it makes you forget you're getting pumped full of poison, and you were doing this bit about how teenagers think they're invincible when they're driving. And I thought, you know what? I have cancer, and I still think I'm invincible. So I figured if I could make you laugh while hooked up to an IV, I must be doing something right. The audience laughed and applauded, charmed by her spirit. Jimmy shook his head in amazement. Madison, I have to say, your attitude is incredible. I mean, you're dealing with something that would terrify most people, and you're making jokes about it. Where does that strength come from? Madison considered the question seriously for a moment. It was clear she'd thought about this before, that she'd developed a philosophy about her situation that went deeper than simple optimism. I think it comes from realizing that being sad doesn't change anything. I'm still going to have cancer, whether I cry about it or laugh about it, so I choose to laugh. Plus, when I'm laughing, everyone around me feels better, and that makes me feel better too. It's like this circle of good feelings that starts with deciding to find something funny instead of something scary. She paused, gathering her thoughts. Also, I think about all the people who don't get to know they're going to die, like people who die in car accidents or heart attacks. They don't get time to say goodbye or make bucket lists or tell people they love them. I'm actually kind of lucky because I get to do all those things. Jimmy felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't just a feel-good interview anymore. He was talking to someone who had discovered something profound about human nature, about resilience, about the choice we all have in how we face our difficulties. Madison, that's an incredibly mature way to look at it. Have you always been this wise, or is this something that came with your diagnosis? Madison laughed. Oh, I definitely wasn't this deep before cancer. I used to get upset if my coffee was cold or if it rained on the weekend. Cancer has this weird way of making you realize what actually matters. Like, I don't care about drama with friends anymore because I might not have time for drama. I only have time for the good stuff now. Speaking of the good stuff, Jimmy said, following the interview outline his producers had prepared, I heard you have a bucket list. Can you tell us about some of the things on it? Madison's face lit up even brighter, if that was possible. Oh, I love my bucket list. I carry it with me everywhere because you never know when an opportunity might come up to cross something off. She reached into her small purse and pulled out a piece of notebook paper that had clearly been folded and unfolded many times. The edges were worn soft, and there were small stains from tears and hospital food. Would you like me to read it? Absolutely, Jimmy said, settling back in his chair, expecting to hear the typical teenage dreams. Travel, adventures, maybe meeting celebrities. Madison unfolded the paper carefully and cleared her throat dramatically, making the audience chuckle. She'd clearly rehearsed this moment, wanting to present her dreams with the dignity they deserved. Madison Clark's bucket list, she announced formally. Item number 1, graduate high school. She looked up at Jimmy. I'm taking classes online now, and I'm actually ahead of schedule. Turns out I'm a better student when I'm not worried about social drama. My teachers have been amazing about working around my treatment schedule. The audience applauded encouragingly, and Madison smiled proudly. Item number 2, see the ocean. I've lived in Ohio my whole life, and I want to feel sand between my toes and taste salt water. My parents are planning to take me to Florida next month between chemo cycles. That's beautiful, Jimmy said. We're going to have to make that happen faster than next month, Madison grinned. Item number 3, meet Jimmy Fallon and make him laugh in person. She looked directly at him with mock seriousness. Check and check. Jimmy laughed genuinely. Consider that one officially crossed off the list. Item number 4, eat at a fancy restaurant where they bring you tiny portions of food that costs way too much. She giggled. I want to know what the big deal is about restaurants that give you one shrimp and charge $50 for it. The audience laughed, and Jimmy nodded appreciatively. Very specific. I like it. Have you picked out which restaurant? My dad did some research and found this place in New York that serves something called deconstructed sushi. I don't know what that means, but it sounds expensive and confusing, which is exactly what I'm looking for. Madison continued down her list, each item revealing more about her personality, her dreams, her refusal to let illness define her aspirations. Item 5 was learning to drive, even though she might not have time to get her license. Item 6 was petting a therapy dog, which she'd already accomplished at the hospital. Item 7 was writing letters to her future nieces and nephews for their birthdays and graduations. Item 8, Madison continued, donate my hair to kids with cancer. She touched her head wrap self-consciously. I did this one before I even got sick, actually. I had really long hair and donated it when I was 14. Little did I know I'd be getting a wig made from donated hair 2 years later. Life's funny like that. As she read, Jimmy found himself increasingly moved by the ordinariness of her dreams mixed with the extraordinary circumstances that had prompted them. This was a 16-year-old girl trying to fit a lifetime of experiences into whatever time she had left, and she was approaching it with more grace than most people approach a typical Tuesday. Item number 9, Madison continued, and her voice grew slightly more serious. Record a song for my parents to play at my funeral. The studio fell completely silent. The casual conversational tone Madison had been using didn't change, but the weight of her words hit everyone like a physical force. Jimmy's smile faded as the reality of what she was facing became undeniably real. Madison looked up from her list and noticed the silence. "Oh, that one always makes people uncomfortable," she said matter-of-factly, "but I figure if I'm going to have a funeral anyway, I might as well leave people with something good to remember. I've been working on this song with my music teacher. It's called Keep Laughing, and it's basically about how I want people to remember the funny stuff about me, not the sad stuff." Jimmy struggled to find words. In all his years of television, he'd never encountered someone who could discuss their own death with such matter-of-fact acceptance while still radiating joy and hope. "Madison," he said softly, That's that's incredibly thoughtful of you." "Thanks. My parents hate that one, but I think it's important. I don't want my funeral to be this super sad thing where everyone cries the whole time. I want it to be like a party, celebrating all the good times we had." She shrugged. "Plus, my little brother Tyler has a really hard time with sad stuff, so I want to make sure he has something happy to focus on." She looked back down at her list, and something in her expression changed. The easy confidence she'd maintained throughout the interview flickered for just a moment, revealing something deeper, something that carried the weight of everything she was facing, which brings me to item number 10, the last one. She paused, and the studio seemed to hold its breath. Jimmy could sense that whatever came next was going to be different, more significant than everything that had come before. "Item number 10, she said, her voice suddenly quieter, more intense. "Help other kids not be scared of dying." The words hung in the studio air like a prayer. Jimmy felt his breath catch in his throat. This wasn't just a bucket list item. This was a mission statement, a purpose that transcended her own mortality. Madison looked up from the paper, and for the first time since she'd walked onto the stage, she looked like the scared 16-year-old girl she actually was, beneath all that courage. Her hands were trembling slightly as she held the paper. "Jimmy," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I've been in a lot of hospitals lately, and I've met a lot of kids who are dealing with the same stuff I am. And they're all so scared, not just of the treatments or the surgery, but of what happens after." She took a shaky breath, and Jimmy saw tears forming in her eyes for the first time. "There's this little boy, Marcus, who's 8 years old, and he has the same kind of cancer I do. He hasn't smiled once since I met him 3 weeks ago. He just lies in his bed, staring at the ceiling, and when his parents try to talk to him, he turns away. He's so scared that he's stopped being a kid." Madison's voice grew stronger as she continued, as if talking about Marcus gave her strength. "If I can make people laugh while I'm sick, maybe other kids won't feel so alone when they're scared. Maybe they'll see that you can still have joy, even when everything feels hopeless. Maybe they'll understand that being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you choose to smile anyway." Jimmy felt his own throat constricting. He looked at this extraordinary young woman who was facing the end of her life with more wisdom and compassion than most people develop in 8 decades, and he couldn't speak. Around him, the studio was completely silent. The audience wasn't just moved. They were witnessing something that transcended entertainment, something that spoke to the deepest truths about human courage and love. Madison wiped her eyes and tried to smile. "Sorry, I didn't mean to get all serious. I know this is supposed to be a fun show, and here I am talking about death and dying. My parents warned me not to be too heavy." That's when Jimmy did something unprecedented in his television career. He stood up from his chair, walked around the desk, and sat down right next to Madison, not as a host maintaining professional distance, but as a human being who had just been profoundly touched by another human being's grace. Madison, he said, his voice thick with emotion, this is the most important thing that's ever happened on this show. He took her hands in his, and the cameras captured every moment of genuine human connection. You want to help other kids not be scared of dying? You're already doing it right now. You're showing millions of people that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about choosing love over fear, joy over despair, hope over hopelessness. Jimmy's voice cracked as he continued. You're 16 years old and you understand something about life that most adults never figure out. You've taken the worst thing that could happen to someone and turned it into a gift for everyone around you. Madison started crying in earnest now, but she was also smiling, that radiant smile that had made her famous, that had touched hearts across the world. Jimmy, can I tell you something? When I first got diagnosed, I was so angry. I kept asking, why me? Why do I have to be the one who gets cancer? But now I think maybe this happened to me because I'm strong enough to handle it in a way that helps other people. Maybe my cancer isn't just about me. Maybe it's about all those other kids who need to see that it's possible to be sick and still be happy. Jimmy couldn't hold back his tears anymore. This 16-year-old girl had just articulated something about purpose and meaning that philosophers had struggled with for centuries, and she'd done it with the clarity that only comes from facing life's ultimate challenge. Madison, he said, you are the most remarkable person I've ever met. Without consulting producers, without following any script, Jimmy made a decision that would define his career. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, addressing the camera directly while still holding Madison's hands, I want everyone watching this to understand something. Madison Clark isn't just a guest on this show, she's a teacher. She's showing all of us what it means to live with purpose, to face fear with grace, to choose love even when everything seems impossible. He turned back to Madison. You want to help kids not be scared of dying? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to create the Madison Clark Foundation. We're going to put counselors in children's hospitals. We're going to make sure that kids facing what you're facing have someone to talk to, someone to help them find their own courage. Madison's eyes widened in disbelief. Really? You would do that? Really? And we're going to make sure your story reaches every kid who needs to hear it, because what you're teaching us, that joy is a choice, that purpose can be found even in pain, that love is stronger than fear, that's not just entertainment, that's the most important lesson anyone could ever learn. The audience erupted in applause, but it wasn't the typical talk show applause. This was recognition, gratitude, acknowledgement that they had just witnessed something sacred. Madison hugged Jimmy tightly and whispered in his ear, Thank you for listening to my whole list. Adults usually stop paying attention when kids talk about dying. Jimmy whispered back, Thank you for reminding me what courage looks like. When the cameras stopped rolling, something unprecedented happened. The entire studio audience came down to the stage, not to get autographs or selfies, but to hug Madison, to tell her their own stories, to thank her for her courage. Cancer survivors shared their experiences. Parents talked about their fears for their own children. Young people told Madison how her videos had helped them through their own difficult times. Madison spent over an hour after the taping just listening to people, offering encouragement, being the source of strength she'd somehow become despite her own vulnerability. One woman, tears streaming down her face, told Madison that her own daughter had been diagnosed with leukemia 6 months earlier and had been refusing treatment. She watched your videos, the woman said, and yesterday she told me she wants to be brave like Madison. You saved my daughter's life. A teenage boy approached Madison shyly. I've been thinking about suicide, he admitted quietly, but watching your videos made me realize that if you can find reasons to smile when you're dying, maybe I can find reasons to smile when I'm just having a hard time. Madison hugged him tightly. Life is hard sometimes, but it's also really beautiful. You just have to look for the beautiful parts. 3 months later, Madison Clark passed away peacefully in her sleep, surrounded by her family, but her impact lived on in ways that continued to amaze everyone who had known her. The Madison Clark Foundation became one of the most successful charitable organizations focused on pediatric end-of-life care. The counseling program Jimmy had announced that night expanded to over 200 children's hospitals across the country. Madison's TikTok videos became part of therapy protocols, helping kids find humor and hope during their darkest moments. Her funeral was attended by over 2,000 people, including kids from around the world who had been touched by her story. They played the song she'd recorded, a beautiful, simple melody about choosing joy even when everything seems dark. True to her wishes, it was more celebration than mourning, with people sharing funny Madison stories and laughing through their tears. Jimmy spoke at her service, and his words captured what Madison had meant to everyone who knew her story. Madison taught us that bucket lists aren't about the things we want to do before we die, he said. They're about the impact we want to have while we're alive. She wanted to help kids not be scared of dying, and she did that by showing us all how to really live. Madison's bedroom became a shrine to her impact. Her parents kept her bucket list framed on the wall with every item checked off. The 10th item had a special notation, completed daily, through the Madison Clark Foundation and every kid who chooses courage over fear. But perhaps the most powerful testament to Madison's legacy was in the children's hospital where she'd received her treatment. There, in the pediatric oncology wing, hung a simple sign with Madison's most famous quote, "Being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you choose to smile anyway." Below the quote was a picture of Madison in her purple head wrap, flashing that radiant smile that had captured the world's heart. Nurses reported that kids would often ask to see Madison's room when they were scared. They would sit in the chair where she'd received her chemotherapy and watch her TikTok videos, finding courage in her example, learning that they too could choose joy over fear. Dr. Martinez, Madison's oncologist, kept a photo of Madison on her desk. "She changed how I practice medicine," she said. "She taught me that hope isn't about promising outcomes we can't guarantee. It's about helping kids find meaning and joy in whatever time they have." Jimmy kept Madison's bucket list in his dressing room, reading it before every show to remind himself of what really mattered. Television could be many things: entertainment, distraction, escapism. But at its best, it could be what it was the night Madison shared her story, a platform for the kind of human connection that changes lives. The little boy, Marcus, that Madison had mentioned in her interview, made a remarkable recovery after meeting her. His parents credited Madison with giving their son the will to fight. She showed him that being sick didn't mean he had to stop being a kid, his mother said. Now he wants to be a pediatric oncologist when he grows up to help other kids the way Madison helped him. Madison Clark lived for only 16 years, but in that brief time, she accomplished what most people never do in 8 decades. She figured out how to turn her pain into purpose, her fear into hope, her mortality into a gift for everyone who had the privilege of knowing her story. Her bucket list became more than just a teenager's dreams. It became a blueprint for living with intention, loving without reservation, and facing whatever life brings with grace and courage. And every time someone watching her videos found the strength to smile through their tears, every time a scared child in a hospital bed chose hope over despair, Madison's 10th bucket list item was completed again, helping other kids not be scared of dying by showing them the extraordinary power of choosing to truly live. The piece of notebook paper that contained Madison's bucket list was eventually donated to the Smithsonian Institution as part of an exhibit on American courage. But copies hung in children's hospitals around the world, inspiring countless kids to write their own lists, to find their own reasons to choose joy over fear. Madison's final TikTok video, posted the day before she died, showed her in her hospital bed, weak but still smiling. The caption read, "Bucket list complete. Thank you for laughing with me. Keep choosing joy." It received over 100 million views and became the most shared video in TikTok history. Sometimes the most powerful messages come from the quietest voices. Sometimes the greatest teachers are the youngest students, and sometimes a teenage girl with a piece of notebook paper and an indomitable spirit can change the world simply by refusing to let fear have the final word. Madison Clark proved that bucket lists aren't about the time we have left. They're about the love we leave behind.